Hi, welcome to the grocery store. Are you here for the usual? Fresh, crisp Ontario apples? I've got some bad news though. They've doubled in price since last time you were in. But I've got something for you. How about these? Fresh Florida oranges, 25% off. What's with the price changes, you ask? Well, it's a little complicated, but it all boils down to something called supply and demand. Here, let me show you. To understand how prices are set, we need to take a look at supply and demand, one of the fundamental principles of economics. Let's take a look at demand first. To understand demand, we first need to take a look at something called the law of demand. And what the law of demand states is that as the price for a product decreases, consumers buy more of that product. And that makes sense. You can probably think of a time that you went to a store expecting to buy a certain product, and when you got there, the price was significantly less than you were expecting, and as a result, you bought more of that product. Conversely, you can probably think of a time when you were going to buy a product and you got to the store and the price was significantly higher, and as a result, you bought less of that product, or maybe not at all. And that's the law of demand in action. Now let's take a look at what this looks like graphically. You may find the law of demand easier to understand when looking at it graphically. So, like all of the graphs today, we are going to have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. On our horizontal axis, we are always going to have quantity, which is the amount that we will purchase of the product. And on the vertical axis, we will have price. And that's going to be obviously the price of the product. Now, we said before that for the law of demand, as the price decreases, the quantity purchased increases, or the quantity demanded increases. So what we're going to see is a downward sloping curve. And this is what we call a demand curve. So like the law of demand states, we could look at a particular price, let's say right here, there's our price, and at that price, people are going to purchase a certain quantity. But as the price decreases, we have a lower price, people will now purchase a much larger quantity. And that is the law of demand, that as price drops, people buy more. Alright, now that we understand demand, let's talk about supply. Now, the same place that we started with demand, let's start off with the law of supply. And the law of supply states that as the price of a product increases, the quantity available for sale also increases. From my experience as an economics teacher, I've found that students have a tougher time with the concept of supply than they do with demand. And I think that's because not everyone has experience selling products, however, everyone has experience as a consumer purchasing different products. So let's see if we can put this into a way that you can understand through an example. Let's say I offer you $5 for the device you're viewing this video on right now, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a computer, and I'm going to give you $5. Chances are you're not willing to sell that device. However, if instead I offer you $5,000 for that same device, and I'll purchase as many of those devices as you can bring me, chances are, unless you've got a really nice piece of equipment, you're willing to sell me that product. And you might run out to your friends, offer to buy their phones or tablets, and then sell them to me to make a profit for yourself. So in other words, as the price increases, more and more people are willing to sell the product. And that is the law of supply. So again, just like with demand, let's take a look at the law of supply graphically. So, just like with demand, we have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. On our horizontal axis, we have quantity, and on our vertical axis, we have price. Now, a supply curve is not like a demand curve because we said price, as the price increases, the quantity available for sale has to get greater. So the price is now going up and quantity is going up. And this is our supply curve. Supply. The law of supply again states that as the price increases, and we can see that here we'll start off with a low price, we read over, and we see that this much or that quantity would be available for purchase. And then now when the price increases and we go to a higher price, we'd read across to our curve and read down, and we'd see a greater quantity is available for sale. And that is the law of supply graphically. So we've talked about the law of supply and the law of demand, but we still haven't talked about how prices are set. So let's try something. Let's try to graph a demand curve and a supply curve on the same graph. And let's see what happens. So once again, we're going to start off with the same set of axes. We are going to have quantity on our horizontal axis, and we are going to have price on our vertical axis. Now, once again, we're going to have our downward sloping demand curve. And we are going to have our upward sloping supply curve. Supply. And what we get is this X-type pattern. Now, something magical happens when we combine supply with demand. What we get is what we call the equilibrium price in quantity. And that's going to be the price that our product will eventually be sold for. It may not be at the beginning, but it will be at the end. Let's take a look. Where do you think our equilibrium price would be? Well, it's exactly at the intersection between supply and demand. Right here where they cross, in the middle of the X. Here is our quantity, and here is the price. That's the price our product will eventually sell for. That is the price, or that is the amount that we will sell. This is the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Now we've said that the equilibrium price is the price that we'll eventually get to. But what happens if the price of our product is initially above the equilibrium price? Let's say we have a price up here. Let's take a look. Well, at this price, we can see that our consumers would like to purchase this much, but our sellers, because the price is high, they would like to sell a lot more, and they'd like to sell a much greater quantity. Now, we call this a surplus. So what's going to happen when our buyers aren't buying and our sellers have all this product available for sale? Well, you've probably seen that happen. People not buying products, sitting on the shelves of the store, they can't have that. So what do? Well, they put it on sale. And so we start to see the price fall. And as the price falls, more purchases occur, and this will continue to happen until we get to the equilibrium point where everything that gets produced gets purchased. We call that the market clearing price. So we've talked about what happens when the price is above the equilibrium price and how we get a surplus. But what happens when the price starts off below the equilibrium price? Well, let's try and take a look. So we'll set a price below our equilibrium price. So there's our equilibrium price and our equilibrium quantity. If we read across, we see that sellers would like to sell this quantity. However, our consumers would like to purchase a greater quantity. So there's not enough to go around for all of the consumers. What do we call this? Well, we call it a shortage. What happens when there's a shortage? Well, sellers start to notice that their products aren't lasting and consumers are buying them up and they would like more. So what do they start to do? Well, they start to increase the amount they're charging for their price or for their product. Consumers, conversely, they may actually modify their behavior and say, listen, we'd actually be willing to pay more. I will bid up and pay more than this other guy just to ensure that I get this product. And we've seen that happen with items that are hot and they sell out fast and people will buy them in the secondary market, maybe on eBay or Kijiji, paying more than the retail price. And eventually we see that our price increases, and that is a shortage.